What's up, everyone? Ron here, coming to you from Washington State, and today I want to talk about why the housing market hasn't crashed, why everything feels so uneven, and what people are calling a K-shaped economy, and more importantly, what regular people like you and me can do about it. If you're in Washington right now, you might be feeling a little whiplash. You hear, the economy is strong, stocks are up, and unemployment is still relatively low. But at the same time, you're paying more for groceries, your rent or mortgage feels heavy, and houses still seem completely out of reach. It's not your imagination. In our state, the median priced house was around $695,000 in mid 2024. And in the Puget Sound region, it was over $800,000. More recently, numbers from the Northwest MLS show a statewide median around the low 600s, about $637,000 in September of 2025, which is only a tiny dip from the year before. So prices have eased a little in some spots, but they're still way up compared with 5 or 10 years ago. Now, put that into this. A 2025 study found that homeownership is unaffordable for about 80% of Washington families based on their incomes versus the current home price of a mortgage qualification standard. So housing is expensive. Most families can't afford the median home, and yet the market hasn't crashed. So what's going on? That's where this idea of a K-shaped economy comes in. Let's break this down in real person terms. Imagine the letter K. One line goes up and one line goes down. That's the idea. One group of people is doing better and better, and another group is getting squeezed. So, same country, same state, same town, totally different realities. Recent reporting has pointed out that top 10% of Americans by wealth now account for roughly half of all consumer spending. Think about that for a second. A relatively small group of households is doing so well and spending so much that they keep bars, restaurants, traveling, and a lot of retail moving, even while a huge chunk of people feel like they're drowning. That's why you hear economists, journalists, and even the Fed talking more and more about a K-shaped economy lately. Now, here's the key point. In countries like the US, the UK, and Australia, and right here in Washington, the dividing line is less about what job you have and more about whether you own assets. Let me give you two imaginary people. Person A is a journeyman electrician in, say, Tacoma, solid income. 10 years ago, they bought a house, a modest house, and then picked up a small duplex in 2019 to try their hand at investing. Person B, a high-earning professional in Seattle, maybe an attorney or a tech worker, making $180,000 a year, but renting a high-end apartment and investing very little outside of a 401k. On paper, person B makes more money. In this current environment, though, person A might be quietly winning. Here's why. Real estate in Washington has climbed massively over the last decade. The state's median home price has more than doubled since the mid-2010s, with big spikes from 2020 through 2022. At the same time, asset owners, people who own homes, rentals, stocks, equity in a business, got a huge push from low interest rates, stimulus, and rising prices. Non-owners got hit with rising rents, higher prices, and often stagnant or inconsistent wage growth. Now, when inflation in the Seattle area has eased to around 2.8% year over year, food and energy are still climbing faster than that. Wages in Seattle did grow about 4.6% over the last year, which sounds okay until you stack it against years of housing price increases and higher overall cost of living. So yeah, your paycheck might be up a little bit, but when the median home is still in the 600 plus range and ownership is unaffordable for 80% of families, that raise doesn't move the needle much. That's why the real is split. On the upper leg of the K, you've got people who bought or inherited homes years ago, people who own multiple properties or other assets, people with stocks, RSUs, and equity in businesses. On the lower leg of the K, you've got people who are renting and watching rent rise faster than their wages, people relying on a W-2 paycheck with little or no investments, people carrying credit card debt at 18 to 30% interest. Same city, same roads, same grocery stores, totally different experience. Now, let's tackle the big question I get all the time. So, how are houses so expensive when people are clearly struggling? Why hasn't housing crashed? Why hasn't the whole economy crashed? Here's the blunt answer. Because the people on the upper leg of the K are still spending like crazy. They're traveling, they're eating out, they're hiring contractors, they're renovating homes, they're buying second homes and vacation rentals. They're sending kids to sports camps and private schools. And when they have extra cash, they're not just leaving it in the savings. They're buying more assets, more real estates, more stocks, more gold and silver, or even Bitcoin, different types of asset plays. All of that spending supports business revenue and jobs, which keeps the top line numbers looking okay, even if the average family feels squeezed. So you can have a booming high-end restaurant in Seattle, a packed ski resort at Crystal, and at the same time a family thinking we can't afford a basic starter home. So this is exactly why some recent coverage has said the K-shaped economy hurts everyone but the rich. It's not that the wealthy households are being particularly evil on purpose or anything like that. It's that the system is set up so that people who already own assets are the ones being rewarded, and people who are late to the party are the ones getting punished. Now, let's bring the Fed and interest rates into this because this is where people get confused. When the Fed cuts rates or signals future cuts, you'll often see mortgage rates start to drift lower, stocks perk up, and the real estate activity picks up a little bit. That feels like good news, and in some ways it can be, but cheaper borrowing can help buyers qualify. It can give current owners a chance to refinance. It can make some deals pencil out that didn't before, but there is a trade-off. So when the Fed keeps rates lower for longer, especially after inflation has already run hot, it tends to support higher asset prices, stocks, housing, all of it. So if you already own assets, those cuts can push you further up the leg of the K. If you don't own assets, every time prices jump again, the ladder gets taller and taller, and the first rung gets a little more out of reach. You go further down. So when the Fed chooses to prioritize the job market and avoiding a recession over truly crushing inflation, what they're really saying is we're going to live with some level of higher prices and hope wages and growth muddle through. Meanwhile, we already know in Washington the median house prices are still far above what the median income can comfortably afford. New construction homes in our state require well over $200,000 in annual income to qualify for a typical mortgage at current prices and rates. So the Fed can cut, and that might help with your monthly payment a bit, but it doesn't magically fix the affordability gap we're living in. Now let's talk about the other piece of this, jobs and AI. We are in a weird moment where certain early career salaries in places like Seattle have jumped, in some areas almost 28% since 2020 for new grads. But at the same time, we've seen a decline in job postings and a pullback in some tech-driven wages as companies tighten up and use more automation. AI is hammering certain roles, customer service jobs, administrative work, some marketing and content roles, paralegal type research tasks, parts of accounting, and back to office operations. Companies aren't always saying, let's fire half the staff today. What they're saying is, how do we grow revenue without growing headcount? So when someone quits, they don't always backfill. They use AI and process improvements to have fewer people do more. That means if your whole financial strategy is, I'll just climb the ladder, get big raises, and that will bail me out, you're betting your future on something that's under pressure. That doesn't mean never get a raise or that your career doesn't matter. Your career absolutely matters. But in a K-shaped world, wage growth alone is not what separates the people moving up from the people sliding down. Asset ownership is. So let's talk about what a regular person can do. If you feel like you're on the bottom leg of the K or maybe somewhere in the middle, the first step is to be brutally honest and ask yourself, if something breaks in my situation, what's most likely to break first? For a lot of people, that's one of these four things. 1, job fragility. You're in a role that AI or outsourcing might hit. 2, high interest debt, credit cards, personal loans, buy now, pay later stuff, right? 3, no emergency cushion. You're one car repair away from chaos. Or 4, rising housing costs. Rent keeps going up and there's no plan for ownership. You probably already know which one of those is screaming at you. If it's debt, especially 18 to 30% credit card debt, that's almost always priority number 1. You cannot build wealth if your money is leaking out at that rate every month. If it's job fragility, you may need to upskill, pivot, or add a second stream of income. If it's housing, you might need to change your time horizon. Maybe the first asset isn't your perfect dream home. Maybe it's a house hack or a small condo or partnering with someone on a duplex. The second step is to make one move that is uncomfortable but reversible. A lot of people get stuck because they imagine they have to overhaul their entire life. Don't do that. Instead, look for one move that you will feel but you're not locked into forever. That could be moving in with a family for 12 to 18 months to get rid of debt. It could be taking on a roommate and using the money saved to pile cash for a down payment. It might be renting out a room in your current place or slashing discretionary spending for a season. In Washington, where the gap between what families can afford and what homes cost is over $200,000 in some analysis. You don't need those kinds of bold temporary moves to stay behind. You need to catch up. It's short-term pain for long-term breathing room. The third step is to stop treating cash like a pet rock. This one is going to sound weird from somebody who loves cash and asset reserves, but in persistent inflation environment, cash sitting still is quietly shrinking. Inflation runs at 3 to 4%, and your savings account is paying you 1 to 2%. You're going backwards, even if the number on the screen looks stable. That doesn't mean go all in on random coins or meme stocks. It means your strategy should be build a realistic emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of bare bones expenses. Keep it liquid. Every dollar above that should have a job. That job could be education or skill upgrades, seed money for a business, down payment for real estate, or diversified investments you actually understand. Savers used to be rewarded more. In a K-shaped driven asset world, owners are the ones being rewarded. So the question becomes, how do I get on the other side wisely as soon as possible? I just want to mention too, this isn't financial advice, but let's zoom out on housing because that's my world. In Washington, we've seen statewide median prices in the 600 to 700,000 range in recent years. We've seen new home prices around 747,000, requiring over 221,000 in income to qualify for a typical mortgage. And we've seen studies showing that 80% of families can't afford a typical home purchase. So if you're looking at Redfin or Zillow estimate and you're thinking, I could never pay that, I get it. But here's the mindset shift. Instead of asking, how do I buy my perfect forever home right now? Ask, what's the smallest, most realistic step into ownership that moves me from the bottom leg of the K toward the upper leg? That might look like a small condo in a less sexy area, a manufactured home on land outside the core of town, or a duplex or a triplex where you live in one unit and rent the others, or partnering with a trusted friend or family member on a first place. In some Washington markets, especially outside the Puget Sound core, median prices are closer to the high 400s or low 500s, and days on market are longer. That doesn't make it cheap, but it does mean there are entry points if you're willing to adjust location, adjust expectations, and get creative on financing. This is where work with a real estate advisor who actually understands investment math and not just pretty kitchens really matters. So let's go back to AI, but this time from a different angle. How to use it instead of get run over by it. So if AI and automation are part of what's pressuring wages and job security, the answer is not to stick your head in the sand. The people who are going to win on the job side of this K are the ones who learn how to use AI to do their job faster, to build skills that are harder to automate, and who combine people skills, sales and leadership, and negotiation with technical tools. In my world as an agent and consultant, I use AI to help market summaries and ideas, and that frees up my time to sit and work with real clients and walk properties and negotiate deals. If you go into an interview and you say, I know how to use these tools to be twice as efficient, you're worth more than someone who says, I kind of avoid all that. So yes, wages are under pressure, but individuals who adapt can still do very well. Just don't confuse a good salary with a complete plan. You still need to convert some of that income into assets. The last piece I want to talk to you about is your environment, who you're around. If everyone around you rents and assumes nobody can buy, lives paycheck to paycheck, and spends every raise on lifestyle upgrades, that becomes your normal. On the other hand, if you start hanging around with people talking about house hacking, small business owners, investors doing their first duplex or triplex, people who are openly discussing paying off debt instead of hiding it, that becomes your normal instead. You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You've heard that. Some of these ideas, they come from being in rooms where that stuff is normal conversation. You don't have to have rich friends to get into these rooms. There's local real estate meetups, there's investor clubs, community college classes, online groups, and on and on. The point is, get around people who are on the part of the K you want to move towards, which is, I'm guessing, the upward side. So let's zoom out, recap what it all means here in Washington. The stats say it's hard. You're not crazy. Median prices in the 6 to 700,000 range. New homes around 740,000. You need two incomes above 120,000 a year to 200,000 a year. About 80% of families are priced out of owning the median home. And people with assets are cushioning the whole system. Their spending keeps a lot of businesses afloat. Their asset values often grow faster than inflation. They're on the upper leg of the K. The people without assets are being squeezed from both sides. Wages are pressured by AI and global competition. Prices for essentials are driven by years of inflation and limited housing supply. The Fed can't fix this for you. Rate cuts might help your payment, but they often support higher asset prices over time. The structural gap doesn't magically disappear. Your job is to move yourself from just wages to wages plus assets. Kill high interest debt. Build a basic safety cushion. Then aggressively but intelligently start moving towards ownership of something. That something might be a condo, a small house farther out, or a house hack, or a small rental you buy with a partner. The goal isn't to flex on Instagram. The goal is to get off the downward leg of the K and onto the upward leg, even if it's just one small step at first. If you're still with me here, this is what I'd love for you to do. And I want you to know this video isn't financial advice. It's just my opinions and for entertainment. So write down your weak points. Is it job risk, debt, savings, housing costs? Decide on one uncomfortable reversible move you can make the next 90 days to strengthen that weak point. If buying or selling in real estate is on your radar, especially here in Washington, reach out. That's what I do. We can talk through what's realistic for you, what timeline makes sense, and what kind of property is the right first step. Even if you're 12 to 24 months out, getting clarity now can literally be the difference between I wish I started sooner and I'm so glad I did that when it felt scary. If you got value from this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with someone you know who keeps saying, I'm just waiting for the crash, or anybody who'd get value from it. And I want to say, I'm not saying that things can't correct or prices can't move down in certain pockets, because they can. What I'm saying is that in a K-shaped world, waiting for a perfect macro moment while not changing anything in your personal game plan is a great way to fall further behind. You don't control the Fed, you don't control global markets, but you do control how you use your skills, how you manage your debt, and who you surround yourself with, and whether you stay on the wage-only treadmill or start stacking assets. I'm Ronnie, trying to help people build wealth, not just a home, but a portfolio, a lifestyle that can handle whatever economy we're living in. So I'll see you in the next one, and thank you.